he's the most unpopular prime minister in the history of Canada. He's certainly the most unpopular prime minister in the history of my life. And I can point to a couple of obvious reasons, but I think that I'm personally and politically swayed towards those reasons because they're the reasons why I hate Justin Trudeau. But what
That's
are
okay. Feel free to begin, and I'll build on your reasons.
I
and
mean,
I'll tell you if I agree. Yeah.
I mean, for me, the two big ones were what he did during COVID, and with the vaccine mandates and the way that he treated the convoy and vilified them. And rather than bring the country together, created division and hate and encouraged people to hate their neighbors and literally, spread lies about Canadian citizens. And behaved like an authoritarian and threatened to and tried even to prosecute some of these peaceful convoy protesters or even just some of the people who were supporting the convoy. I thought it was really scary. And then his hypocrisy of presenting himself as this feminist guy, but it was his party that brought forward Bill C-16 and passed Bill C-16 and then went on their merry way announcing at every possible turn that trans women were women and refusing to address the issue of men and women's prisons and refusing to even engage with women like me and the other women across the country who wanted to talk about why men were allowed into girls' change rooms and were allowed to compete as women or girls in sport. And, he completely ignored the issue of women's rights and safety and spaces, again, while presenting himself as Canada's top feminist. So those are a couple of things.
That's a solid list. Yeah, I agree with all those things. I was actually up there for the first weekend of the convoy, and it was freezing. It was like -40. And I wanted to go up because I took my Blackmagic camera. I still have some video I want to process and use later about this and looking back. But it was -40. They immediately shut down the mall, downtown Ottawa, which made it even colder. So nobody could warm up there, which I found very suspicious because nobody's closing the malls for the pro-Hamas protesters or anything like that, right? So that the differential treatment of protesters really struck me. During that time as well, there was a claim that a trucker attacked somebody in a soup kitchen or verbally. But of course, that comment went through without anyone it ever happened to be proven, right? It circulated very quickly. I was really bothered by that. It's almost as if like the accusation just stands. Then there was a comment that a trucker tried to, with like blue hair or something, tried to like burn down a building. But I mean, it wasn't a trucker, of course, and the trucker wouldn't have had blue hair. I mean, all of this stuff, and the people I spoke to on the Hill were people from all over, some people from Montreal, some parents there in the day, just being like, I want my kid to go to gym class. I want, this to happen. An RCMP officer who had left the job because he was forced to go into houses and remove families that were visiting each other. So this is something that I know was happening in Quebec as well. We locked down. I was in Montreal and we locked down quickest and the hardest. If we were working in the evening, we had to have permission slips and then cops could pull us over. So it was really dark days, but of course, no matter what each province was doing, it was all guided by the government, right? So Justin Trudeau, Theresa Tam, all of this stuff. And it was really disturbing. So that's a big thing. And I 100% agree with you about the women's issues. It's so nice to see Trump signing in the no men in women's sports. Speaking of that, I just was watching the video about that. And how could anyone look at that and not say, that's so obviously the right decision, right? How did we get to a point in the US and Canada in thinking that was ever right or ever a good idea? Like, what is it about the nature of some people who think that. And I mean, I have some ideas about why people do it, and I'm sure you do too. But yeah, so those are two things that are definitely a big part of it. There's foreign interference scandals, closing the files on it, with us not knowing what's happened. A lot of people are saying that Hoag's report is just not giving us enough information. There's not enough transparency. Lots of contracts to Liberals, ethical violations. It's just, and also just like the nature of platitudes, right? Never answering questions in the House of Commons. Everything's a platitude. Stock photos, shoots, doing things. No substance to anything. And then you put this up against, the emerging conservative leader at the time, right now, Pierre Poilievre, who is very specific and very clear and asks questions which don't get answered. And interestingly, Canadians, again, I think this is part of our psyche, Canadians in the press think that asking direct questions is mean.
Right.
This is something we have to change right away. This is something we have to. Calling somebody out on something is mean. He doesn't call them name. You don't have to call him a name. You just, ask a question. The Apple conversation is the best, right? When the guy, the what I'm talking about. So when the guy is, you're taking a page out of Trump's playbook, and it takes a chomp of the apple. So, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And just waits. He stops and he waits. He's Socratic, right? He just asks questions back. And it's so satisfying. But to Canadians and reporters, they lost their minds. It's like, that's mean. How is it mean to ask a question calmly?
Or to expect the media to do its job, and for journalists and reporters to behave like journalists and reporters and not just be, shelling for the Liberal Party. I mean, it's like, it was so funny the way that Pierre Poilievre was treated recently by the CBC. I think it was you that tweeted this video from a CBC reporter. Okay, you explain what happened there then.
Oh, which one?
Do you know? Okay, sorry. So they were essentially asking if Pierre Poilievre would be willing to step down, to get out of the way, so that this doesn't make any sense to me. But so I guess that Canada can figure out this tariff crisis. I don't know why. I mean, Pierre Poilievre isn't in the way. He's not the prime minister. So
yeah, so I'll explain that. So what that is about, that's a CBC reporter suggesting that if by some reason the Liberals were to return to Parliament and prorogation, pretty please promise that you won't do a non-confidence vote and trigger an election so that the Liberals will have to face the music. Can you imagine? And, CBC has a vested interest in this, right? Poilievre has already suggested that he would end their funding. And one only has to turn on the television or listen to your radio or read an article from CBC and the slant, even in straight news. I mean, there's op-ed writing, which always has a slant, right? Columns and stuff like that. The stuff that I deal in. And then there's news, right? Straight news, supposed to be straight news. But CBC's straight news even is very, the framing, what's said, what isn't said. It's always very much pro-Liberal. And I mean, the Liberals are, paying the money, paying the CBC with our tax dollars, right? Yeah. And, I grew up with CBC. And in the many years that I grew up with CBC, I liked certain radio programs. I saw a change over the years. There's definitely a difference between French CBC and English CBC, but there's absolutely no question now if I turn on my television and watch CBC that it's definitely slanted in the direction against the Conservatives. The word conservative has become synonymous with basically evil. you know, and we know that's not true in Canada. First, it's not true, but also in Canada, there's really not a whole lot of difference between conservatives and liberals, or at least there didn't used to be. I think Trudeau's liberals are an aberration in a sense, like his movement, but yeah, and it's something for sure.